The 90s, it was edgier, it was grungier, it was a little more self-aware.
Time for total escape.
The industry is changing, both on the big screen and on the small screen.
It opened up a whole new world.
Every night we were blowing shit up.
It's a big ride.
Groovy.
Hell no. I'm not going to look in the mirror and say Candyman 5 times. I'm not stupid.
All the A-list stars, they want to be able to see what it feels like to rip off somebody's head.
Hello, fellow followers. Welcome back to FanZcene. Greg here. And today I have for you, what type of horror fan are you? Do you watch scary movies year-round or only on Halloween? Why do I ask? Well, we're going to bring up an article and a survey that asks such questions to lots of Americans. And I felt like as somebody who's a physical media collector and who is a horror fan, this is something I really wanted to talk about, cover, and make a video about. But also, before we get into this, if you guys want to order you a copy of In Search of Darkness, 1990-94, I have a link in the description. Clicking that link and using that link helps support my channel and helps me deliver great videos and horror and physical media stuff to you guys. And also, maybe consider liking, subscribing, and all that if you like what you see here. But let's go ahead. It says, Horror Beyond Halloween. New Blumhouse study reveals nearly half of respondents watch scary movies all year long. That's a good sign for horror fans. But by the way, I'm not a fan of Blumhouse. Just putting that out there. This article is by Jack Dunn. Let's scroll down and see what it says. It says, through a survey of 3,000 Americans, Blumhouse has released a study revealing the viewing habits of horror fans as well as their favorite films and subgenres. Of those surveyed, 44% identified as diehard horror fans consuming the genre all year round, while only 6% wait until Halloween to throw on their favorite scary movie. So I like hearing that. I like seeing that the 3,000, I wasn't polled. I wish I was polled, but I like seeing that of the 3,000 they polled that most people tend to watch horror films year round. And yeah, I know that horror fans are, horror is not for everybody. So there are those people that just like when Halloween comes around, that's when they watch horror movies and then they move on. Me personally, I watch horror year round. I can watch horror from all my favorite subgenres and genre films in general, for horror, sci-fi, drama, whatever. I can go back and forth. I can blend them in with, like Shawshank Redemption and Nightmare on Elm Street. I can do that stuff. That's just who I am. That's what type of movies I like. But it's spooky all year round here, baby. It's spooky all year round here. But let's continue what it says on in the article. It says 45% of respondents feel horror movies have improved since their introduction into the mainstream film market. Not saying that I haven't seen some new horror movies that I do like, but I can't agree with that. I mean, I've covered it here. Like the decade of the 80s was like probably the greatest era of horror movies, has yet to be beat. 90s had some great ones, which I did, In Search of Darkness 90s, which I've been talking a little bit about 90s here. They had some great movies. I mean, the 70s was it's like great years for horror. I still think 80s is the best, but I can't say that modern horror has improved over those. I just can't say that. I'm sorry, I can't. It says, of that 45%, 49% said the improvements stem from better production quality, 44% said that the improvements are due to advanced technology and special effects, and 39% accredited more original and creative concepts. Okay. Nothing beats practical effects. I get it. We're in an age where things have improved digitally and everything. I get that. I can get where they're coming from. Nothing beats good old practical effects. And what's this bullshit about original and creative concepts? Most of it's just all remakes. It's just all remakes or legacy sequels nowadays, right? I mean, Terrifier is one of the most original slasher films in a while that's taking concepts from the original slasher films from the 80s and stuff like that. Once again, the 80s. I want to know who they pulled, because that kind of I can see some special effects has got better now. Yeah, but like some of those old school practical effects just cannot be beat. Technology has advanced. I can't say there's an original creative. I mean, I'll give this year, 2024. I have seen more new original creative ideas for horror movies in 2024 than I have in a while. I will say that. I will say that in this year. I may not like all of them because I'm not a huge modern horror fan, but I will say I've seen a lot more creative original concepts in the year 2024 lately in horror than I have in a while. And it almost feels like horror is sort of going back to its roots a little bit here lately. But let's continue with what it says here. And it says, as for when horror fans first fell in love with the genre, 52% started watching scary movies before age 12. Yeah, 42% of millennials and 30% of Gen Z participates said they first got into horror after being introduced to the genre by a family member. The most cited first horror movies watched were Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, The Exorcist, Jaws, and Friday the 13th. Well, you really can't go wrong with those horror movies. That's interesting. I can't say I'm Gen Z or millennial, which clearly tells me where this poll was conducted more towards. But I would, I've often thought about my first horror movie multiple times. I can't really remember my first horror movie because it was always sort of just been around. It was always sort of been there. I remember seeing the Universal Monsters. That's why I'm a huge Universal Monster fan. Those are some of my earliest memories of horror movies, like traditional Universal Monster movies. And I remember seeing Monster Squad, and I would sort of even throw Goonies in there. It's not really a scary movie, but it sort of went hand in hand in that decade, of movies that I saw. But also I vividly remember like the Freddy Kruegers, the Nightmare on Elm Streets, and the Friday the 13th movies, and the Puppet Master movies. Those are sort of like all the first type of horror movies I remember seeing around me because they were always around. My older brother is a huge Nightmare on Elm Street fan, I should say, and which makes me a huge Freddy fan. I'm a huge Nightmare on Elm Street fan. So I remember those, and it's, it's like that's where I get my love of Full Moon. I love my Universal Monster, the monster movies and stuff. That's what I remember seeing. It actually took me a little longer. I would have to say I was probably 13 or so when I first started seeing Michael Myers. The Halloween movies, but they like horror movies has always been around. I haven't never really been able to pinpoint my first one, but I know they've always been there. So that's why I've sort of always, horror's been around. That's why I have no problem watching horror year round, because it's always sort of just always been around, and I've always sort of just watched it, So that's where I get that. Let's continue on here. It says, Blumhouse asked participants to categorize 100 of the most popular horror movies of their last 5 decades into subgenres and select films they most strongly identified with each subgenre. The most popular selections in order were psychological thriller, survival horror, supernatural, paranormal possession, horror comedy, and science fiction horror. The films most closely associated with the subgenre were Split, The Road, The Conjuring, Scary Movie, and Alien. Okay. Yeah, this is clearly, they were younger. What's survivor horror? Is that like, I don't know some of the, I'm not a huge fan of like I know people like The Conjuring and stuff like that. I'm not a huge fan of like ghost story possession type movies. Me, as I just described a minute ago, I'm a huge slasher fan, the subgenre of slasher monster movies, and I do love a good horror comedy, like in the vein of Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, stuff like that. Really, Split. What the hell is The Road? I don't even know what The Road is. I know what Split is. I do agree. I like Split, but I wouldn't. I don't know. And The Conjuring, I'm not a big fan. And Scary Movie. I mean, a Scary Movie is funny, but like, the fact that Scream itself is a spoof movie and they're spoofing Scream and Scary Movie just doesn't make sense to me. At least Alien is on there with Sigourney Weaver. I mean, that's great. That's what I mean, is survivor horror, is that like slashers? I know what like a psychological thriller is. I mean, I dig psychological thrillers, man. I do. Like, I like I said, I like slashers, monster movies, and stuff like that. Wow, that's interesting. It's interesting who these studies are. I mean, we all have our own opinions. We all have our own thoughts. You like what you like. I like what I like. I'm not trying to judge anybody for their likes. This feels weird, and it feels like this study was geared more towards a certain generation than most generations. scroll down, it says between age demographics, psychological horror was the favorite of baby boomers. So they did actually poll older people. Okay. Gen X and millennials, while Gen Z selected survival horror as their favorite subgenre. What is survival horror? Survival horror. I can't even say that word. Is that like slashers? I'm sorry. I'm old. I'm 41. I'm old. I'm what is survivor horror? Survival horror. Sorry. What is that? Is that like slashers or something? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that is. I'm probably sounds stupid. I probably do. Whatever. And it says the study was conducted by Sage Outcomes and commissioned by Blumhouse. 2,000 respondents participated in the genre categorization survey, while the remaining 1,000 were surveyed on their viewing habits and how they were introduced to horror films. And that's the end of the article. So, what are you guys' thoughts on that? What do you guys think about what we just read there about that survey? To me, it sounded like a lot of it was more geared towards the younger generation. And once again, I'm not judging. You like what you like, right? You like what you like. We're all different, and I do find it pretty cool that who have at least 3,000. I mean, I can't say that's a big enough number to judge horror fans everywhere and what when they watch horror movies. But that's pretty interesting that most people consider watching horror movies year round, and then only certain people at Halloween. So that is interesting. And it's much like when I talked with Adam Green. He talked about how he created a horror sitcom for horror fans, and most horror fans have never seen a sitcom before up until that moment when they started watching his sitcom, because a lot of horror fans, generally speaking, only watch horror. Period. That's the only genre, period, they watch. They watch horror movies year round, and that's the only horror movies they watch, horror stuff they watch. They don't really branch out there. Me personally, I like to branch out a little more. I like horror and all types of genres and everything. And I'm curious too, as you, my audience, what do you guys watch? I think I'll put a poll up on my community tab. So after you watch the video, if you made it this far, go over to my community tab and check out the poll and answer whether you watch horror year round or or only on Halloween. Excuse me. I will have that on the community tab. Let me know your guys' thoughts on that, and let me know your guys' thoughts on this article, this survey, and horror, or some of your favorite horror movies, and how you watch them year round in the comment section down below. Once again, if you want to order you a copy of In Search of Darkness 1990 to 94, link in the description, helps out my channel when you use that link. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. Maybe consider hitting that like button or subscribing, hitting that bell for notifications, or sharing the video out for everybody to see, or join and become a channel member, because that would help out my channel immensely. Thank you, and shout out to all my channel members. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Thank you guys for being channel members here and for all of your support. And once again, for everybody watching, thank you for watching wherever you all are. Please have a great, safe, happy, healthy day, morning, afternoon, evening, and night. Always support physical media, because it truly is the superior format. Godspeed.